I'm like, how do I raise my price? People aren't going to buy that. And it was a whole mentality shift of, if you're going to stay in business, how do you get people to stop? And so we're like brainstorming, and you've only got like 2 seconds, 3 seconds or whatever to capture their attention. We were going, burnout's real. It's real. And it's tough. We can always go back to it because we still have everything. And it was the same thing with bakes. Oh, we can cut it back. We can always ramp back up.
How do you handle those conversations with other farmers, with customers, just kind of in general? Today's a little rainy. We went from dry and super hot to cold and rainy, like in the flip of a switch. But you are Tricia.
Yes.
And this is Creekside Meadows.
Yes.
You have a really large property here, and right now, to get out of the rain, we are standing in your sawmill area.
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about what you're doing and how you're doing it. I know on the way down in the Polaris, we talked about how you've built your own barns with the sawmill and stuff. So overview what you have going on here.
So we do grass-fed beef, pasture-raised pork, woodland-raised pork too.
Okay.
Depends on where we put them. We do vegetables for our farm stand.
Okay.
Do maple syrup. We also do some lumber and then firewood.
Wow. And I see your hat, Veteran Farmer Coalition.
Yes.
Are you a veteran?
Yes, Air Force.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, Paul was Air Force.
Ah,
Yeah,
cool.
nice. Okay. Have you always had this farm? Is this like family land?
Nope.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about how you got the land.
We moved here 13 years ago. Our anniversary is coming up here in July for it. We used to live about 20 minutes away, and we started off with 26 acres with an old barn. That's what my husband had when I met him 32 years ago.
Okay.
He had the barn with the acreage and leased out quite a bit of it to the neighbor dairy farm. And then when we were getting married, we didn't have a place to live, so I think it was my mom who suggested that we build an apartment in the barn and live in there. So it's a 100 by 33 foot timber frame, 1874 barn. Built a little 30 by 30 apartment in it. 1 bedroom, bathroom, laundry room,
Wow.
kitchen. It was very crude, very simple. We had no money. Borrowed a little bit to do it. And then, when we got married, we asked for money to buy the furnace and stuff like that. And started there and just basically homesteaded. Had a little garden, and then I came home from weekend duty from the guards, and my husband had plowed up like a half acre in the backyard. We gotta go a bigger garden. And that quickly got out of hand with weeds and things and stuff like that. When our son was 2, my husband had come up with this great idea of he'd always wanted beef cattle. So he's just like, oh, let's just get a couple cows from so-and-so down the road. And so George and Betsy were 2 Herefords that were dropped off that we bought. I was like, we don't have any money. How are we going to do this?
Right.
And he had cut some ironwood, which is like hophorn beam, to do fence posts, but they rot off in 3 years. But he was like, oh, this will get us started. Put up 1 strand of electric wire around part of the property, and we just let George and Betsy wander around and eat the grass. And couldn't afford any grain, so they were grass-fed. Okay. And the next year, we put George in the freezer, and I came home with the back of the pickup truck just full of beef. I'd never seen that much beef before in my life.
Wow.
And started cooking the steaks up and noticed automatically that it tasted different. And so this is how many years ago? 20-something years ago, and almost 30 years ago. And so that just started me asking questions of like, so why does it taste different? And I actually called the butcher up and said, why does this taste different than the grocery store? Not saying he did anything wrong. I was just like, you see this all the time. What is it? He's like, well, what did you feed him? I'm like, well, grass. And he said, well, that's it. If you feed him grain, then that's what they feed him in the grocery store meat. He says, if you're only fed grass, then that's what you're tasting. And I was like, really? He says, some people like it, some people don't like it. So then it started me just doing the research of what is grass-fed and what's grain-fed and how beef is raised that goes in the grocery store. And so this is like pre-internet stuff. Right. So I'm going to the library and getting out books and magazines and asking questions. And I'm stopping at farms and asking questions. And we're surrounded by dairy farmers, and they're not grass-fed. They're just feeding them full of corn and silage and stuff. I said, you can't feed cows grass, they'll die. And we're like, what? But this tasted great, you know?
Yeah.
And so that kind of started the whole thing. And then we added some hens for eggs. And we're selling it all from the farm, like word of mouth and stuff. Never had to really leave the farm to sell it. Pretty soon we're just like running out of land. So it's 26 acres, which is actually quite a bit. There's swampland in it. We're along a creek that floods. And one summer we had multiple hurricanes come up through. And that creek flooded all of our best fields, right as we're getting ready to graze them. And we're trying to buy land nearby. We're trying to borrow land nearby. and we could use some pieces of land, but then the hunters that released it would like, no, you got to get off of this because we need our deer plots and all this different stuff. And I was getting really frustrated and going, this homestead turned into a farm business. Yeah. And my husband's still working off the farm. I'm on the farm, homeschooling my son, and it's kind of growing, and he's really into it. And I said, let's sell the place and buy something bigger. Prices to sell were really good, but we have this really odd structure. It's this big, it still looks like a big old barn. And we had built a little bit more into it, but still over half of it was, on one floor was unfinished. And it still had 2 stories to go up if you wanted to. But we're like, we can sell it. My husband's like, I am never selling this place. It's a half mile from his parents. It's a half mile from his sisters. His whole family is down through this whole valley and stuff. We're never leaving. And I was getting frustrated going, well, we're going to have to change something because we're selling everything we can produce. We're still not making more money, much money, if anything at all. And my idea was if you go bigger, you'll make more money. And it'll solve the whole problem. Yeah. Because that was the mentality back then too. And when I would talk to the dairy farmers, that's what they would say. Yeah. Well, you got to go bigger. Then you make more money. My husband was like, not going to sell. And in the middle of all of that, a friend of mine had suggested I take this class for beginning farmers called Whole Farm Planning with Holistic Management. And it was like 8-9 months of training. And we'd have to drive a couple hours away. But a group of us in this area would drive a couple hours. We would carpool. And go to this class, and there was like 20 of women in it, and it was everything from writing a holistic goal to marketing to grazing to financial planning to everything that you needed to know to run a farm business. And like the grazing part was like at the end, but everything else was like, you have to be profitable in order to stay in business. And so that really helped me just get our finances in order and to understand why we weren't making money, which basically was because we were too cheap. And I wasn't even doing the math of what the cost of production was.
So you probably weren't even hitting margins.
Oh gosh, no. I didn't even know what margins were. To set my prices, I was just looking what other people were charging and looking what the store was charging. And come to find out those other people didn't know their numbers either. And you can't base what we do on what store prices are. Right. So they would use some of my numbers and break down the enterprise to see where we're losing money, what our price needed to be. Can we cut costs anywhere? We were so frugal, and we're still very frugal. So we're like, I don't know if we can cut any more money. We're always doing everything. We scrounged everything. We borrowed stuff. It was like, I don't know if we can cut any more money. So basically it came out, we have to raise our price. And I'm like, how do I raise my price? People aren't going to buy that. And it was a whole mentality shift of if you're going to stay in business, you have to demand the price that you need to stay in business. And I still tell people that today, and they'll still argue. And I'm like, but when you raise your prices, you can actually make money, and you attract a different type of customer. So I might not be able to sell right to my neighbor because of their financial situation, but that's not my problem. And it's not even really a problem. It's like my job is if I want to have the farm, and I want to keep it going, and I don't want to have an outside job to supplement it, it has to make money. And my husband had come home at that time and said, you know what? Let's sell. Yeah. He said, I'm tired of it. One of the fields that we were using, the granddaughter had moved in and they plowed up half the field for their garden, right as we're going to harvest hay. And he's just like, I'm tired of this. No one will sell it to us. They're making deals with the big dairy farmers that are the big CAFA ones that are milking 1,000 cows. At the time, now they're milking probably 5,000 cows. Right. They're making all these backdoor deals and kitchen table deals and stuff. And he's like, okay, let's sell. Of course, it's the worst time. and it's an odd piece of land and stuff. And we had new siding. It had the original 1874 siding on it. Wow. Siding. So we got this whole place. Everything got painted and landscaped and stuff. We put it on for sale the next year, and it didn't sell. And then we ended up hiring a real estate agent, and we finally sold it. And it's going into winter. We hadn't bought a farm because the bank didn't value what our property was worth because it was still assessed at like a barn. Yeah. And now we're trying to sell it for $250,000, $300,000, and it's assessed at $50,000. And the bank was like, no. So we couldn't even get approved for another mortgage until it sold. And so we did that thing of we bought a camper trailer and we parked it behind my in-laws half mile up the road. And so after the closing, We moved what animals we still had left because we had downsized a lot of the herd, moved them up to my in-laws on their little 5-acre pasture. And we were in that trailer for like 8 months trying to find another property, and finally found this property. When we had been selling at the old place just from the farm, and people were like, they wanted more. And they wouldn't tell anybody where they got their meat from.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have that much. So then we moved here and we're 20 minutes away. We had customers who left us because we weren't their charity case anymore, because we weren't living in the barn. We weren't poor enough for them. Like, they bought from us because they felt bad for us. And the minute we were like getting a leg up, not that prosperous, you know, there's still a mortgage.
Right.
But they left, and we're like, what in the world? And we tried selling from the farm. It was tough to get the word out where we were. And so we actually did a holistic management testing question with one of my mentors about how to advertise the farm, of like doing a farm store and then doing advertising. And then we tested, you know, doing ads in papers and what it would cost. Does it really go after our target audience?
Right.
And it was, what's your ideal customer and where do you find them? And then one of them was there's a little farmer's market in our town, like 10 minutes away, or there was the big one in Syracuse. And it came down to those two, of like, you know, which one would be better for us, which one was really in line with our holistic goals, and what we wanted from the farm, and where we wanted our customers to come from. And it actually ended up being the little local farmer's market.
Really?
Was the better fit for us. And so we tried it. And the first year, it was pretty decent. It was still a little market. There might have been a dozen vendors. And it was very casual.
Yeah.
And there was one other meat vendor there. And so we're the new people. And then the next year or two, we got a new manager, but she had a marketing background from before she became a farmer. And so she really ramped up the farmer's market.
Okay.
So next you know, there's like 35 vendors.
Wow.
And this little park is like packed with tents.
That's
like
awesome.
we're like tent to tent to tent. There's like no space between tents. You're selling meat, which you've sold it before. And then when you go to the farmer's market, it can be kind of tricky to sell it because people can't see it. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what the packages is. They don't know how much it's going to cost. So I was trying to find classes online or even books that would address selling meat at farmers markets. And there really wasn't that much out there. But the marketing stuff that was out there was like how to make it so it's what the customer is comfortable with. So customers are usually comfortable with shopping at a store. So how do they buy meat in the store? It's in a case.
Yeah.
They can see it, they can touch it, it's already priced, all the label and everything. So we're figuring out, how do we do this in the middle of July?
Right.
In New York, where, you know, it can be cold like today, or it can be 95 like 2 days ago.
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out, and we're like, okay, so we're bringing the meat in the coolers. And I had done a big board with pictures of the meat on it, like cooked pork chops and cooked bacon with the prices on it.
Right.
So it would get people's attention to stop instead of just having like little flyers or says we sell meat, and they would see that and go, oh, I'm hungry, you know, kind of thing. And that kind of helped some. So then we said, you know, what if we put the coolers out front, people can shop from them, which was like a big no-no. People are like, no, you don't want them touching your meat. I'm like, I want them to buy it.
Right.
I want them to do that.
Yeah.
And so we started putting coolers. We got some milk crates and we set the coolers on there. And then I got some of the Velcro with the sticky side on it and put it on there and laminated some cards so it would say what was in the cooler. We put it on the front and then on the top. So on the front would see like pork, pasture-raised pork with a picture of a pig and stuff. And then on the top would be these other like index card size, and they're laminated.
Yeah.
And they would stick to the top wherever the Velcro thing is. And it would say, you know, the pork chops, the price per pound, the range of the price. So they had an idea when they opened the cooler, can they afford those pork chops right there? Kind of thing. So we started doing that. Sales immediately doubled, like across the board. It was like,
wow.
The coolers are coming home empty. And I was like, yes, I need more coolers. And so we did that for a couple of years. And then we're like, people are still walking by us to go to this other vendor. They're not even looking at us. And I'm like, how do you get people to stop? And so we're like brainstorming. My husband came up with the idea, or maybe it was one of them came up with the idea, because they're right with wood, make it look like barn beams. So all those metal posts of your tent, they made fake barn beams. So we had tore down some barns years before. We still had old barn wood in storage. So you just cut it to size, and you just make 4 sides. One has a hinge, the little loop hook, and you would just snap it over the legs, and it looks like a barn beam.
Yeah.
And it's old red paint. And they did it so there was a frame up over top with our farm sign on it. So it was really distinctive, and I got almost everybody to stop. So we got them to stop.
Okay.
So we're like, yes, we got them to stop. Now,
Right.
now maybe they'll read something, you know?
Right.
And I'm reading all this, understanding all this marketing stuff of like, you know, what eye level they need to be at and how much they want to read and how much they don't want to read. And you've only got like 2 seconds, 3 seconds or whatever to capture their attention. And so we're bringing all these coolers, and I had to swap out coolers because we were selling quite a bit. And then we came up with the idea of what if we bring freezers? Because someone at the Syracuse market was bringing freezers, but they were bringing it in a big truck with an electric lift gate, and they were on concrete. We're out on grass. So we're like trying to figure out how can we bring freezers. So we figured out you could get a really large hand cart that had a really long tongue on it. And we bought small chest freezers. My son made like pallets for them to go on. So they sat down in these pallets,
Okay.
so on plywood. And then you could slip that tongue underneath the pallet and you could lift up that freezer. And bought a landscape trailer, really cheap from a neighbor. And so like things were like falling in and still scrounging.
Yeah.
And we could roll them up onto the landscape trailer and we could roll them back off and across the grass to our booth. I would put ice packs underneath all the meat, and they're cold. So they'd leave the farm at like -10.
Right.
And they're well insulated.
Yeah.
And we get to the market and we're there from 9 to 2. So you get there around 8 and you set up and stuff. So there at that time, the power's off, and I'd have thermometers in there, and we never got over 0.
Wow.
So we didn't have to power them. And I did the same thing with a big sign on the front that said grass-fed beef. And then I did magnets, laminated cards with magnets on the back on top to tell everybody what was in and where. So we did that, and so it made it easy for people to see what was in those freezers, and
Right.
they could touch it. And I had everything already weighed and labeled, and so they could figure out what they wanted. And sales would like double again. It was like amazing. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And people were like, well, you can't have freezers here that are unplugged. I'm like, but it doesn't come over 0.
Yeah.
And if it's an especially hot day, the tail end of the market would get really quiet. And I just brought literally a cooler full of ice packs. And I would just put ice packs on top of what meat was left. So if someone came and shopped, they just move the ice pack out of the way. And it would keep it extra cold. But the thermometer's in there, and it's like still -5, you know, and it's down in there.
Well, and you have coolers. I mean, what's the
Yeah.
difference in a freezer versus a cooler?
Exactly.
The coolers aren't
And the
plugged in.
cooler's way better, or a freezer's way better insulated than a cooler
Yeah,
is.
those coolers start melting a little bit.
And people were like, oh my gosh. And the other meat people are still doing it the same way. And they would just have a table with a tablecloth on it with their clipboards. You didn't really know what they sold.
Right.
And we had a massive banner, like a 12-foot banner, at the back of our booth that showed our animals out on grass.
Yeah.
It showed our vegetables. It showed the farm. So when people looked at that, they automatically knew what was going to be for sale in that booth.
Right.
And it said where we were and what our name was and stuff.
Yeah.
And it was just like really eye-catching. And we did that for years. And then when COVID hit, the farmers market shut down, and it's March, and we're still doing a winter farmers market once a month. And we had enough meat in the freezers that we'd harvested in the fall to last till like July. So we had like, I think 5 or 6 chest freezers full of meat. And the farmers market's closed, so people are calling up and going, well, what do you got in the freezer? Put everything online. I had to go through all those freezers, weigh everything, do a complete inventory,
Oh my
post it
gosh.
all online. Sold it all in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah. And we've been like that for the past 4 years. We haven't had to go back to the farmer's market.
Wow.
And so now we have the farm stand, so I sell vegetables at the farm stand. And then any extra meat, I'll put a little freezer there and sell that.
Okay.
So we've been doing it that way. This is one of the groups.
One of the groups.
One of
So
the groups.
do you do just feeders, or do you have sows and a boar as well?
We used to do sows and a boar, and we did that on and off for quite a few years because we were having trouble getting piglets. We used to buy them from a guy that did a really great job, and he got out of it.
Like feeders?
Feeders.
Okay.
And then so we started doing our own sows and boars, and just kept on trying what we could, and it would go great, and we would get 12 live piglets to finish, maybe 10 on a bad year. A few years ago, our last group of sows, they had a great group of piglets, and then they didn't get bred. And then they didn't get bred, and they still didn't get bred, and we're like, what is going on? And we weren't even seeing heats, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And we started doing some immunization to see if that was something that was going on, and then one got bred, and the other one didn't. We're like, oh. So friends of ours, a couple miles away, do a lot of sows.
Okay.
But they're in the barn. They go out for breeding out in their fields, but then they're in the barn to have them. And so we said, I think we're done. Let's take a break from having sows year-round, piglets born year-round, and trying to juggle all that and still keeping them outside. And so now we're buying in feeders from them. So this is a group of 7, and then over further there's a group of 10. So they've been in this spot for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
They're getting ready to be moved over further. So this area was full of this sedge grass and rose bushes that we were trying to get rid of because we've opened up the canopy. So they're usually different. We move them all over different parts of the farm, wherever we want them to renovate.
Okay.
Because they're going to dig, and we know they're going to dig, so we employ them. And so this is going to get reseeded.
What's the regrowth look like? Can you show me where they were before? I'm just curious. Because I think all too often pigs can get a bad rap that they dig up too much. You said, well, that's what they're going to do, so we're going to employ them. And then people say, well, that's going to ruin the soil. I personally haven't had that experience. I've had the exact opposite.
It depends on what you want them to do. So we have a goal for them. If we don't want them to turn it into this, we just move them faster.
Right.
And they're still going to till some, but it would heal faster.
Right.
We wanted this ripped up because look what they did to one of the stumps.
Oh, yeah.
And the other stumps. They're really working it. So that's breaking it down.
And they're eating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're chewing it up. And so, this big one is going to be here for a little while before it rots or we can get rid of it. But we can run through this quick with some discs. And I'll just come out here with a hand seeder and plant the same mix that you saw at the beginning of the meadow.
Yeah.
And since we've opened the canopy up, as you see, we took out a lot of trees, it's going to regrow, but we can leave it. The seed bank is there. We've proved that in different parts of the farm where we've used pigs and let it sit. And within 2 years, it's coming back. But it takes a little bit longer.
Right.
Now we know, well, if we want to renovate this quicker, we'll just put in some seed. The seed cost isn't too bad. Back when we weren't making that much money, we were like, well, we'll just let it go.
Right.
Because we didn't have the money.
So in regards to how you've pivoted throughout the years, how have you handled then? You said that you had sows, you went back and forth on it a little bit. How do you handle that from like a farm perspective? You talked about it from the management perspective and like the business perspective of what made sense, but from the farming perspective, how did that transition or that little dance work out?
There's quite a few interesting discussions on the farm. I mean, customers were fine with it. We explained what we were doing, but as far as like, we used to raise pigs year round, and we wanted 2 litters a year. With buying in feeders, we decided we're not going to raise anything in the wintertime. So it's just the beef cattle are here.
Is that to give you a break?
After doing it for over 20 years and having pigs, just about every single one of them year round, we're like, a breather would be nice. As the farm has evolved, like we used to do a lot of chickens. We used to do like 1,000 meat birds, 100 turkeys. Did that for a long time, and we thought that was like the foundation. Chicken, it brought in everybody.
Yeah.
And it's a fast turnaround. And we did all the butchering ourselves. Because when we started, there was nobody local within like 3 hours that could do it legally for us to resell it.
Right.
Now there's a few around. Like we phase out chickens and turkeys. We were really tired of doing the processing. I had a really bad hand injury, just repetitive hand injury.
Yeah.
Like I just had thumb surgery 3 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
That finally solved some of that problem. And we needed a break because we had downsized that and needed a break from that. And said, we'll just stop doing it. We can always go back to it.
Right.
Because we still have everything. And it was the same thing with pigs. Oh, we can cut it back. We can always ramp back up. And so we stopped raising through the winter. So there are people who got spring pork weren't too happy. Some people left. Some people just got fall pork. But it's nice when you're going through a central New York winter, when you've got lake effect snow coming in, and you don't have to worry about pigs. Like, they have huts they go in the wintertime. But you still got to keep them in the yard.
Right.
Or you try and put them in a barn. So the only other barn that's open is the dairy barn. It's not really set up for pigs and all of that. So it kind of adjusted. We didn't need the pork to sell through the summer because we're not the farmer's market. And as we've evolved everything and stuff and shifted, it's just like, so we don't have it. We'll probably lose customers, but there's usually somebody else. And then sometimes it works better. You could raise less, have your price adjusted accordingly, and make the same amount of money.
Because you said when you had to raise your prices initially that once you explained it, actually most people understood.
Most people understood it.
And I wonder if it's the same with the pigs then, that you're like, look, we get like 7 feet of snow in the winter. Do you think we should have pigs out in that?
Or do you want
then-
them in the barn?
Yeah.
Do you really want them in the barn?
You want them
raised
stuffy in the
outside?
barn. Yeah.
You know, they're going to be raised partially in the barn. Is that how you want them? Or we're going to have to construct a whole other structure. And we debated that. But to really make another structure pay for itself at a certain size, you need to have a certain volume. And it was like, we don't have to supply the farmer's market anymore. And we get to a point, you know, we've been doing it for 20 some years. We're in our 50s. We're just like, there's a quality of life. We've busted our butts for this long. And our son is on the farm. He does stuff on the farm. We went bigger because he was on board with it. He has his own business now. And he said, if it was him alone on the farm, it wouldn't be this diversified and big and everything.
Yeah.
And the first thing to go would be pigs. Because they are a lot of work in the summertime.
Yeah.
When you got to keep moving them around and planning where you're going to put them and stuff like that. And then they can be, once they get bigger, they can be very obnoxious.
Yeah, they can be obnoxious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just love what you're doing. We're going to finish up as long as the rain mostly. I mean, I feel like it's starting to rain harder now.
It is. It's unbelievable.
It's not going to stop. It's probably going to get worse.
Pigs love it.
Pigs love it. Your dog loves it. Humans, not so much. Camera, not so much.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get to see the cows today. That's okay. I still really love your story here. And just my final question is, how have you handled the perseverance of this? And I'm speaking from myself. When we were asking questions to ourselves at the farmer's market, working on marketing, trying to have conversations with the customer, and it is pouring. When it got much harder, we were asking ourselves, why are we still doing this?
Yeah.
It's not making the profit that we're needing it to make. Or like you said, if we're gonna do anything more, it's gonna have to go bigger. We were landlocked, can't go bigger. So how did you navigate that perseverance side of it? How did you do that?
We're a little stubborn.
Okay, okay.
We had a lot of plans to go even bigger than what it is. We've cut back a lot.
What cut back?
The whole farm is cut back. Because, I mean, a few years we were doing 45, 50 pigs a year.
Wow.
And selling it all at the farmer's market at a much lower price too. And then the beef herd is probably as large as it's going to get. And that's only 12 mom cows, but it's all start to finish here. And that's the max the land can actually support of what's in production now. And we make all of our own hay. We've had the talks this year, like we cut back on pigs this year a little bit. We'll probably cut back a little bit more next year. We're running out of land for them to renovate. And then there's the whole thing of moving them faster or putting up different fence for them.
Yeah.
Because there's this portable stuff. And so then we'll look at, well, what kind of infrastructure will we put in so we could rotate them to different spots just for pigs. And then it becomes, is it worth it? Are we really going to keep doing this much? And I even looked at, if we ramped it back up, like I was watching like Jordan Green, the video, of ramping it back up to that, which we had plans to do that. It was like, that quality of life thing, but there's the perseverance. But I've been messaging back and forth with a good friend of mine who's out near Albany we were going, burnout's real.
Yeah.
It's real. It's tough. We have a lot of enterprises going to use up things. Like I do soap, we do maple syrup and do stuff. But it gets to a point where it's just like, is it worth it anymore?
Yeah.
It is. It's very real. See, I'll get teary-eyed about it because it's like, I love the land. This is going to be in our family probably forever.
Yeah.
It was in the previous family for 60, 70 years. But we'll have to find ways to make it work where we're not working ourselves to death and selling it too cheap. Because there's a lot of people that are just locally, the whole region, that sell it so cheap. Online, I was saying to another woman farmer, your price is too low, raise your price. And they argue back. I mean, when I had a farmer on my farm, this was at the old place, they came to the farm, did a tour and stuff. They're like, girl, your prices are too low. I listened to her.
Yeah.
When she said that, I listened to her and went, what? And then I was taking class on that. And when the instructor is telling you your prices are too low, you're feeding people a product that's high quality, highly nutritious, highly sought after. You're selling it to them so cheap that it keeps you at poverty level, and they can afford to pay more. You can't afford to sell it that cheap. So I used to have lots of part-time jobs off the farm. And then when we were ramping up the farm, I quit them all because it's like, no, the farm is going to pay my wage or we're done. And it's still an ongoing thing. We see people that are selling a half a cow for $3 a pound. It's like, why bother? I'll shut it down.
How do you handle those conversations? Because that is hard. And
Yeah.
I can understand, like, emotionally where those people are coming from.
Yeah.
The nobility of it. I want to feed my community. I want it to be affordable. Food is a way of life.
Yep.
But at the same time, this is a business.
It's a business.
And you have bills to pay.
And
if you were going to
Yep.
start making widgets, you were going to
Where are you
sell
gonna get
your widgets.
Where are you going to get the money to buy the parts for the widget?
Right. You have
And-
to make it make money
Yes.
if it's a business. Now then there's that whole other homestead side of it, right? Where
Yes.
people are just doing it for themselves. How do you handle those conversations with other farmers, with customers, just kind of in general?
I used to be really nice about it, and I'm not so nice anymore. And quite often I'll just say, your price is too low. Do you have a mortgage on the property? What's your mortgage? How much land are the animals using? Because if you're just living in a house on a little lot, that's your private property. But when you've got animals on land, those animals should be paying for it. They're hurting any of us who are trying to make a living doing it, who don't have that outside income or don't want to have that outside income. We're trying to make a living out of it and make it sustainable. So the holistic management training goes back to it's the people, the land, and the profit. And the last word is the profit. And if a farm business does not have a profit, you don't have a farm anymore. And you don't have the land anymore. And then you don't have the people on the land anymore.
Right.
And so when this property was for sale, before we bought it, the plan was all that road frontage was going to be houses. And where we're standing was just going to be leased out for honeyland. It would probably end up being houses too. And there's plans around it all over. You know, what do you want? Do you want to see animals out raised in a nice, kind, healthy environment, people making a living at it who aren't on welfare? Like, why should we be putting our hand out for help to raise food for people? You know, farmers used to be highly valued. It would be really nice. It's a dream. They'd be valued more. And at a time during the pandemic, they were valued more. And it goes back to Americans have often forgotten that. Now with farmers, I try to be really tough with them and go, you really need to look at your cost. And why do you have to work 2 jobs just to keep your farm? If you raised your price, you'd be in a better position. And the argument always comes back with people can't afford it. When a farmer told me, another woman farmer, told me to raise my prices, and she said, you're worth it, you need to stay in business. I listened, and then when I went into training, I listened, I preach it. I found out when we raised our prices, we had better customers. We had customers that really appreciated what we do.
Yeah.
And like the core ones we have now, you get cards from them with smiley faces and flowers. And they'll leave little gifts for you. They leave notes at the farm stand. Thank you for all you do and stuff. And they really, really appreciate it. And I can say back when it was a little cheaper, they might have appreciated it, but not that level. And contrary to the popular belief, we're not here to feed the world. This farm isn't here to feed the world.
I always said that. I cannot feed the world the way I'm farming, but with you and you and you and you, we can feed our communities, and that branches out, and then we can feed the world. I've always said that. I love that. What a perfect way to finish up. Thank you, Tricia, so much for having me out here. I'm so sorry we couldn't get up to see the cows. We've been watching the weather for the last 2 days, and I thought we were going to be in the clear. And on our way here, I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to rain.
I will get some videos of the cows up on our Facebook and Instagram.
So we'll, all of your links, your social links, we'll put in the description below.
Yeah.
But I just appreciate this. I appreciate the way that you have pivoted and transitioned and changed and just dug down and done what you needed to do to reach your goals. I absolutely love that. So thank you for sharing that with me. I appreciate that. Pivoting is something that we talk about 1 or 2 times in a business sense. Like, you know, you need to make a change and then the business will do this. But what I learned with my conversation with Tricia is that when you have a farming business, you don't pivot once or twice in the lifetime of the farm. You pivot every single year, and things aren't the same, and they don't have to be the same. And as long as you are continuing to follow your own goals and do what you think is right, you're gonna go. You know, you're gonna stay in line. You're gonna do what makes you happy. And I just love that. It really resonates with me, with our story. And I just love being out here. Again, I'm sorry that it's pouring rain. Not something that I guess I should apologize for because it's nature. But nonetheless, it's beautiful out here. I'm so thankful that you are here with us. and I will see you at the next